Hello, everybody. I am very pleased today to meet with Father Gregory Hallam. Father Gregory is an Antiochian priest in Great Britain. Our talk today will be focused on Orthodoxy in Great Britain in general, and particularly on Antiochian Orthodoxy in Great Britain. Hello, Father Gregory.
Hello there.
I will ask you
Welcome.
to introduce yourself.
Everyone who's watching.
I will ask you to introduce yourself.
Yes, fine. My name is Gregory Hallam. I'm an archpriest in the Antiochian Archdiocese of the British Isles and Ireland. I've been Orthodox since 1995. Before then, I was a priest in the Church of England, ordained in that since 1982. I'm 70 this year. I'm married, got a wife, Curia Helen. I've got one daughter, and she's married to Philip, and they have what is my granddaughter and Helen's, whose name is Lily, who is nearly 4 years old. So in my late autumn years, to have a grandchild is a wonderful thing. Perhaps a little more about me later, but Hallam and I, before this, I've just been talking about our mutual interests and what we do. And my passion is for science, and particularly for cosmology and astronomy. So I can say something more about becoming Orthodox, perhaps if Hallam, if you want to pick that up, but
Yeah,
you may just
please talk to us about that.
One word, Pascha. That's why I became Orthodox. One word. People can become Orthodox for lots of different reasons, but it seemed to me that only Orthodoxy really understood the dynamic of both the cross and the resurrection of our Lord in being saved. You know, a continuous progression.
Could you elaborate more on that?
Well, I think that, you know, the West, the non-Orthodox, the heterodox West, has many things to commend it in terms of its contribution to Western civilization. I think it's important as Orthodox to recognize that, not just write it off. Having said that, I think in the early modern period, Christianity in the West took one or two routes and paths that led it off the right royal path to the kingdom. And I think some of these were barely concealed or disguised, even pagan notions of what the sacrifice of Christ was all about. So I think that Orthodox thinking biblically and according to the mind of the fathers have a very different take on such questions as, how has Christ saved us? You know, from what and by what means? What is the significance of the cross in the context of the Old Testament, for example? How do we receive the resurrection of Christ as being an integral part of that saving event? Of course, we place the cross at the center of our Christian lives, but then to regard the resurrection as somehow, theologians talk about an eschatological reality, a reality yet to come, without understanding how the kingdom of God transforms in the power of the resurrection and by the gift of the Holy Spirit human persons now. We only have half the story if we leave out the resurrection. So Pascha is what made me Orthodox, but also the worship of the church, because I was used to a church which was liturgical. I was in the, I suppose you would say, Orthodox, Catholic, charismatic, evangelical, all of them, traditions of the Anglican Church, and I could see value in all of them. But it seemed to me that it was almost like the fake Humpty Dumpty. I don't know, in America, Canada, the children's nursery rhyme, Humpty Dumpty. Have you heard of Humpty Dumpty? Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. And it seems to me that Western Christianity has fractured, and each piece is a part of the whole. But by virtue of that fracturing, sometimes each piece thinks that it is the whole. And this is where the distortions come in. So we can recognize in the scattered pieces Orthodox vestiges of Orthodox Christianity, but only when Humpty is back together again, which all the king's horses and all the king's men could not do, will we have a vibrant Western Orthodox Christianity. And that's not done, I mean, forgive me, but that's not done by tinkering around in the Western tradition. It's done by the Orthodox recognizing that there was a Western Orthodox tradition. That's a big step to make for many Orthodox people. There was an original Western Orthodox tradition.
Yeah, and today
somehow this needs to be recovered and made afresh and new in today's present context. Yes, sorry.
Today we are celebrating the feast of Joan Cassian, which is a Western Orthodox Christian.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so important for the development of monasticism in the West.
That is correct. That is correct. For this reason, certainly, maybe one day we will talk about the ancient history of Orthodox Christianity in the West. But today I would like to ask you about the modern history of Orthodoxy in the West.
A quick tour. Now, what I ask my yours and mine listeners, viewers to understand is that I find dates difficult. So if I don't get the dates right, I apologize.
Don't worry about that. We need scheme.
I know certain things like 1066 in English history, but you know, practice little else. Really, the history of, I suppose, depends on how you define modern. I'm going to interpret modern as being everything from about the 17th century onwards.
Okay.
And this is a period of immigration into the UK. Sometimes Greeks under Ottoman rule, coming here by way of trade or settling here, maybe sometimes for purposes of furthering their education or academic purposes. The first Greek Orthodox communities, for example, in Cardiff and Manchester, were largely populated by Greek commercial people plying their trade backwards and forwards across the Eastern Mediterranean, and some of whom settled here. And what happened in those early days is that, and we're talking really about the Greek Archdiocese, I'll talk about the Russian in a moment. They used to ask a bishop of their village or city back in Greece, can you send us a priest? And so a priest would arrive, and of course he would be a Greek ministering amongst Greeks. But of course, in those days, everyone knew there was one Orthodox Church. And of course, at the beginning, in certain places, the Greeks didn't have their own church. Sometimes they were met with, frankly, hostility by Anglican bishops, one particular one in London, who said, oh, yes, you can borrow one of my churches, but you mustn't have any icons in it because those are idols.
Mm-hmm.
So the Greeks went off to the Russian embassy, because there was an embassy chapel in the Russian embassy. And for a time, I think they were talking now about the 18th, 19th century, services were held in the Russian embassy chapel for the Greek community.
Oh, okay.
Which is wonderful, isn't it? Particularly now, bearing in mind the quite deplorable hostility between certain patriarchates. I'm going to try and not mention names and not mention jurisdictions in this conversation, which is only proper. But we all know what I'm talking about. So yes, from those encouraging beginnings, there were new waves of immigration, weren't there? Particularly with the exchange of populations and the terrible problems in Asia Minor and Greece and Pontus and everything in the 20s and everything there. And of course, there were waves of immigration also into Western Europe, particularly from White Russians, so-called, those fleeing the revolution. And Paris became an important center for theological development and the presence of Orthodoxy in Europe, and that had an impact also in England. But I think we move into the 20th century, trying to do a very quick summary of this history. Move into the 20th century, there are new waves of immigration, but now folk from other places, Eastern Europe, for example, also laboring under Russian influence, if not direct Soviet rule. So you've got a situation as we hit the 1950s of there being probably about 50 or so Orthodox communities across the country with different national backgrounds, all served by not necessarily resident bishops, but certainly clergy sent by bishops from abroad, and maybe bishops who lived abroad, and some of them living in the West. So, for example, today there are Orthodox jurisdictions in the UK. I think the Georgians, I think the Serbs, whose bishops lie elsewhere in Europe. And this was our case, for example, in the early years, when we moved from being a vicariate under the patriarch to being under the Bishop Gabriel, memory eternal, in Paris, who had ordained me, and then Metropolitan John in the Diocese of Europe, talking about Antioch now, who later became the patriarch, and of course our first resident bishop, His Eminence Metropolitan Silouan. So the actual story of Orthodoxy in Britain is not too dissimilar, of course, from any country in the West, Australasia, North America, South America, where we might find South Africa, where we might find Orthodox communities. I think an outstanding example of the exception to that rule of immigration is the Orthodox Church of Japan, which you and I have already talked about,
Yeah.
which is a church of the Japanese, for the Japanese, and pioneered by that wonderful Orthodox Russian missionary, one amongst many in the Far East, St. Nicholas of Japan, St. Nicholas Kazatkin. So there are some countries where Orthodoxy has truly indigenized, assimilating the culture and language and history of the people, and becoming a truly established church of that country. You won't find anything Russian in the Orthodox Church of Japan at all. Here is a man who, when he died, not only had a church funeral, but was so respected by the Japanese establishment and government and emperor that he had a state funeral as well as a church funeral. This was a man who, in the Russian-Japanese war, and I'll stop talking about him in a moment.
No, not at all. The opposite. It is very interesting talk.
Yeah, I mean, in the
the
Russian
subject of my next question too.
Oh, all right, then.
Please.
I'll make this my last comment.
Yeah.
In the war, I think it was 1917, was it? I reckon dates. Between Russia and Japan in the Far East, he withdrew from active ministry. And when Japanese Orthodox Christians came to him and said, Vladika, we love you. You are our bishop, but you're Russian. Our countries are now at war. Do you know what he said? He said, I withdraw. I will still look after you. I will care for you, but I withdraw from public ministry. I said, well, what shall we do? He said, you're Japanese. You love your country. You fight for your country. That didn't make him very popular back in Russia, by the way.
Yeah, which is, I understand that. You know what I mean? This is also a very important lesson, how to deal with political issues when you are a religious leader. I won't say you don't want your nationality to disturb your ministry.
Yes, you cannot let that happen, and you cannot let your nationality deform your ministry either.
Exactly.
By all the philatelistic errors. I'm going to say something provocative now. This is a warning to all listening.
Yeah.
Bishops have the responsibility for being guards and guardians, pilots and teachers within the church. It is their responsibility to guard the unity of the church. So I'm speaking to bishops now. Yeah. Vladika, Sayednas, everywhere, all the bishops of the Orthodox Church, please put away and put aside your nationalistic concerns and work for the unity of this church.
I agree with you, Father Gregory. This is very important. In fact, this is very, very essential. And we can see now the divisions between
I mean, why would any Westerner
church based on political issues?
Yeah, why would any Westerner now think the Orthodox Church was coherent when we're so busy falling out with each other?
Yes, exactly. If we don't present ourselves as a one church, as a church with one heart, why people would come to us?
These Orthodox, they say they preach a gospel of peace and have the beauty of theosis and all the other wonderful things people admire us for, but look how they fight.
Exactly. Now, in fact, I was very pleased with talking with St. Nicholas of Japan and how he dealt with establishing the Orthodox Church in Japan. And now I would like to ask you about the situation of Orthodoxy in general in Great Britain, and particularly, what is the situation of indigenous Orthodoxy in Britain?
I think that indigenous in the sense of, say, using English is the lingua franca,
And
that
also born there, like people born
yeah,
there.
my own situation, yeah,
Yes,
because
yes, exactly. And of course,
I have
using
no
English
background.
and using English, of course, but
Yeah,
at least
sure.
born there because because as you know, Saint Raphael of Brooklyn, he couldn't see a future for Orthodoxy in North America without reaching people who are born there.
Yeah, this is vital. Of course, we want to minister to people who first, second, third generation have come here and settled here. And I think immigration is a beautiful thing. It's not something that should be resisted. Of course, we have to make sure that the society is equipped to care for people and to give them opportunity. But this is how America was built. It's been a great blessing to Britain. I'm quite upfront about this. I regard immigration as a blessing. But, when you're trying to actually have a society formed by integrating all these national backgrounds and everything else, there has to be also a place for those who come to Orthodoxy, to Orthodox Christianity, okay, from here, being born here, so that they find that they are welcome, so that people don't say, as sometimes they do, oh, I see, they don't say it quite as badly as this, but it's almost like, shouldn't you be in the Church of England? I mean, this is a Greek church. Are you okay with that? Or this is a Russian church, or this is a Romanian church. People, being raised here, or even if that's not happening, that kind of unkind words. People don't mean them to be unkind. They're just genuinely perplexed. Why are you here? And I have heard that related to me as being said in my own city in one particular church, not to be named. So people have to feel welcome. When they walk through the doors of the temple, they have to see a warmth, a greeting, and say, do you understand the Orthodox service? And they say, no. I say, well, we do have it in Greek, Russian, Romanian, whatever. But on the first Saturday of every month, we have a liturgy in English. You're very welcome to come here, and we will help you to understand what's going on. Perhaps you'd like to come to this liturgy on the first Saturday when we have English. And it is true that a number of churches that hitherto have been almost monoethnically, as I call it, exclusively Greek in language practice or custom, or exclusively Russian or Romanian or whatever, are just starting to have liturgies in English at least once a month. And that's a way really of trying to, without dividing congregations ethnically, which is the danger of this approach, but at least it's an attempt to present Orthodox Christianity in a way that can be understood by people whose only language is English and who haven't a clue. They've been attracted to Orthodoxy for different reasons, because of what they've read, or their marriage, their partner is Orthodox and they want to know more about it. This is often a very important route into Orthodoxy. Or their experience of Christianity in the West has not been encouraging for them, and they want to see, does the Christian East, as they think it's the Christian East, it's not really, as we all know, it's everywhere, but does the Christian East have anything to offer? Well, the congregation itself needs to be geared towards welcoming these newcomers and answering their questions, then pointing them in the right direction. It's beginning to happen. It really is, and I thank God for it. In all the jurisdictions, it is beginning to happen. But I'm an impatient man, and it's not happening quick enough. And it's not happening consistently enough. And it's not happening with enough strong leadership for it to be more prevalent.
Yeah, this is what we should one day talk exactly about that, like more in details, like how we can achieve that desire that you have toward the churches being receptive to a native people in the
You know what St. Arsenios of Paros said, don't you?
Sorry?
The great Greek saint St. Arsenios of Paros.
Yeah.
And I have been to twice.
Yeah.
Do you know what he said?
No.
He said, Britain will not become Orthodox again until the British venerate their own saints.
That is true. That is true. That is true, and we have that in America. In fact, we have now a number of them.
All the saints of America.
And
Yeah,
some of them are very native. They are not just, you know what I
exactly,
mean? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the Catholicity of the church, isn't it? You know,
exactly.
there's a wonderful story in John's Gospel where the risen Christ appears to the disciples. They haul the net ashore. They're excited to see the Lord, and the net is not torn. That's the detail in there is the net. Think fishers of men, right? The net is not torn. The net being the church, right?
Yeah.
One thing I'd love to tell people is John tells us that there were 153 fish, right?
Yeah.
Now, are we really, because we're not literalists like biblical fundamentalists, are we really to think that at that point the disciples sat down on the beach and methodically counted them one for one after the other, rather than engaging with Jesus?
Yeah.
No,
No.
that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It makes more sense when you realize that there was a Greek zoologist writing at the time who catalogued all the known species of fish in that part of the Mediterranean that were known to him. Guess
And
how
they
many there were?
they were 103 when
There were 153, the same number
153. Okay. Yeah.
same number we find in John's Gospel.
Oh yes,
John was an
153.
educated man. St. John was an educated man.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the net is not torn. And look at all those different varieties of fish that do not tear the net.
Yeah. Yeah, this is wonderful. The number 153. Oh,
So
I
it's
understand the number now.
biblical numerology. You know, it's very important.
Yeah.
You know, in Revelation, John the Divine, when you're 3.5, it's half 7. And
Yeah.
7 is the completeness of creation. So 3.5 is something not yet complete.
Yeah.
144,000. I'm a mathematician in up to high school level and just on the cusp of university. So, you know, 144,000 in the Revelation of John Divine is 12 squared times 1,000, which in Jewish terms means universal completeness, a bit like 153. But this time it's a multiplier, 12 squared times 1,000. 12, obviously significant.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
It's not, as Jehovah's Witnesses suppose, exactly 144,000 members of the elect.
Yeah. Now I will go to his thrice blessed memory, Bishop Christos Ware, because
Amen.
yeah, I would like to describe for us what was his effect on endogenous Orthodoxy in Great Britain, particularly. Of course, he has a worldwide effect on Orthodoxy. Like in Syria, he is very respected. His book Orthodox Way was influential to many people. You know what I mean? In the
It's a
Orthodox
wonderful summary.
way.
And then another little book, How Are We Saved? Which is just really one, like the 100 chapters in Ascetic Fathers. It's just one line guides to salvation in the Orthodox Church. Very effective.
Yeah. For this reason, I would like you to describe for us the impact of Bishop Charistos Ware on the spreading of Orthodoxy in England.
Certainly. I knew him personally because he was the chairman of the board on which I sat of Orthodox Christian Books. I was the company secretary, he was the chairman, and Nicholas Chapman, who's a friend of mine, a lot of people have heard of in America, his various travels for service of the truth, of the Orthodox Christian truth. And we all sat on this committee, and we saw at first hand the kind of man that Metropolitan Callistos was. And he brought joy to everyone whom he met. He was such a lovable person, very erudite, very knowledgeable, a patristic scholar, involved in ecumenical relations, of course, with the Roman Catholic Church, various inter-church dialogues that he participated in. An Englishman And I think that has to be stressed because he had a very old world English cultural heritage. He also had the most winsome, deep Oxford voice, which I won't attempt to copy, but which I am doing, of course. You can see it in all these videos. And that richness in his voice alone was very attractive. I'm saying things that are very subjective because, you know, his impact on the church wasn't simply in terms of what he wrote, wonderful though that was. It was the person that he was. And, you know, he had a large heart. You know, he recognized in Lewis, for example, C.S. Lewis, a man after his own heart, you know, who has written so capably in the Christian West about things that many Orthodox would share, perhaps not everything, but perhaps a man before his time, Lewis. And Bishop Callistos recognized this in him. And he told us that when Lewis was buried in Oxford, he that is Bishop Callistos, said Orthodox prayers, the Trisagion prayers and other prayers over his grave. He was a man who I shared my time with and got to know on the now defunct theological committee serving the Assembly of Bishops in the British Isles and Ireland. Sadly, that structure has fallen away in the Assembly of Bishops, largely because of the problems between two patriarchates, let the reader understand. And on that theological committee on which I served, again, he was a joy to everyone, and he had this wonderful ability to get the best out of everyone. I was even on the same board, I was secretary to that as well, of the Institute for Orthodox Christian Studies in Cambridge. Again, the same impact. I mean, if ever is a man, a teacher, who is worthy of the title of saint in our age, it is this man.
Wonderful. I hope the Greek or the Constantinople Patriarchate would consider that. You know, I hope that. In fact, that brings to me the question of charisma in Orthodoxy. Yeah, like do you feel that charisma was impactful on many British or not?
Of Callistos?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. If I mean, he often came to. We had a gentleman who organised lectures, Bojar Avari, in Manchester University, because our parish is, very close to the university. And Bishop Callistos would often come and speak to those. And in that kind of environment, his charisma, his sanctified persona, for want of a better phrase, was just radiant. And you know, he had wonderful communication skills, wonderful gifts of communication. And when he was talking, you were always aware that he was talking to you, not just to everyone, talking to you. And he peppered, as many will see in his videos, which are still online, he peppered a lot of his talks with such wonderful, gentle humor. And indeed, in one of the meetings of Orthodox Christian Books, I remember, in Oxford, in his flat, he said, welcome, everybody. I want to show you something very precious to me, something that has given me enormous delight over many weeks. It's newly bought by me. I just want to show it you. So I think, oh, what is this sort of thing? So he takes this clockwork mouse and he winds it up, and he sets it on this piano. He had a grand piano, shot, of course, and this little clockwork mouse went round and round and round. You know, I think it squeaked or did something. You know, he said, "There, isn't it wonderful?" And now to business.
Yeah, it is.
Forgive my impersonation, but isn't that the mark of a saint? Not a holy
I agree
fool,
with you. That simplicity, that spontaneity.
Yeah, and someone once said that he who has not learned to be joyful and to enjoy humor in the presence of the Lord has bad faith.
I
You
agree
know,
with you.
if we labor under an idea of God, and this it is an idea, which is a bad faith idea, of the one before whom one cannot laugh. I mean, in Lewis's understanding of joy, you know, that deep-seated lightness of spirit that finds joy in creation, joy in human relationships, then that's a very sad state not to have that. To see someone, you know, exemplified in him who has it in bucket loads on steroids, you know, it's just, it makes you think, wow, this is the part of the gospel to transform human life. This is standing in front of me.
That is wonderful. That is, yeah, you know, memory eternal for
Indeed,
him,
memory,
and yeah.
the
Now
servant of God.
I will go to, you mentioned a little bit about the history of Antiochian Church in
Yeah,
Europe and in England a little bit. Um, uh, I I would like you to elaborate a little bit more, and particularly I would like you to elaborate about the deanery in England and transition between deanery and archdiocese, and why it took
right.
so long.
Now there's a story. 7 years, actually.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, here we go. Antioch in the UK. Probably the most notable Antiochian person in the UK. We have to go back to the 7th century and to Theodore of Tarsus, part of the Patriarchate of Antioch, who is our patron saint in our diocese. And he came here. Pope Vitalian sent him. And I think he was in a Greek monastery in Rome at the time. It may have been further south, but I think it was in Rome. And Pope Vitalian sent him here to put the church in England, not Church of England, put the church in England into better shape. Because it had all sorts of problems, like vacant dioceses, you know, the thing was just a mess. And he came as a biblical theologian. He set up a school for biblical studies in Canterbury. He came with two minders, Adrian and Benedict Biscop, because the Pope didn't quite trust him because he was a Greek, and he thought that he would, you know, enforce Greek customs on obviously Latin Orthodox Christians here. I mean, not Latin in the sense of language, just in the sense of, you know, in Rome's Patriarchate. But actually, that was very far from his mind. He was really concerned to develop and bring together and unify the church in England. And it didn't mean that he was without controversy. He had a disagreement, a strong disagreement with Wilfrid over the Diocese of York. That was settled. He was a patron of the arts, and he instituted the first known synod, local council of the church in England at a place, probably in a place in Hertfordshire. We don't know exactly where. And he bequeathed to us a penitentiary for the consultation of confessors, and his books. I mean, Oxford University Press, I can't remember the exact title now, has published a collection of his works for those who are interested. Now then, the reason why Theodore is our patron is obviously because he's Antiochian, but obviously because he was also, being Antiochian, well aware of the universality of the church and the need to see it grow locally according to local custom and according to local language. That's Antioch at its finest.
I understand. Yeah, I understand.
Antioch today in the UK, because that was your specific question. Right. From about 90, again, dates, I apologize to folk at the cathedral if I get this wrong, but from about 1981-82 through to 1995, there was just one Antiochian community in Britain and Ireland, and that was in London, and the cathedral community of St. George. And although there were some Syrian Christians there, I think it's fair to say it's predominantly, not only, but predominantly perhaps people of Lebanese extraction who come and settled here, not just businessmen, although certainly those, families who had settled here, made a life here. And they were renting a redundant church of the Church of England, which sadly now has had to go back to the Church of England. That's another story, which I won't go into here. But as I say, for those 13 years or so, this was the only Antiochian church. And then suddenly suddenly perhaps for Antioch, but in 1993, some of us who were formerly, at that time anyway, priests in the Church of England, petitioned the local jurisdictions here. We started with the Greeks and the Russians because we thought that it was unfair, really, and also, frankly, because we didn't know what potential there was in Antioch. I don't think we really knew very much about the cathedral, to be honest with you. But we petitioned the Greek Archdiocese, and this needs to be put on record. I'm sorry if it embarrasses some people. We petitioned the Greek Archdiocese and the Russian diocese. We said we want to become Orthodox. We have taught the Orthodox Christian faith in our parishes because the Church of England is very hospitable to different interpretations. It's not very clear always on what actually everyone believes, but there's a certain degree of freedom that one can take advantage of in the Church of England. And we had taken advantage of that freedom in the Church of England, which is why I thank the Church of England. I'm not negative about the Church of England, because it nurtured me in the faith from the time of my conversion when I was 22 years old until the time when I left it in 1994 when I was 41 years old. So we petitioned the Greeks and the Russians, but we were told, quite frankly, at a meeting in Oxford with actually Metropolitan Callistos Ware, representing the Diocese of Thyatira, and also Bishop Basil, as he was then, in the Diocese of Shiraz under Metropolitan Anthony, whether there was any possibility of us coming on board into Orthodoxy with our communities. Now, this really needs to be understood very clearly. With our communities, properly catechized. We weren't saying we were necessarily going to be ordained to care for them. They had been our congregation, of course, in the Church of England. By this time, we had left the Church of England, right? Is there a place for new communities in the Orthodox Church? Or will you insist, as they were doing at the time, that we came into Orthodoxy into existing parishes in their dioceses, one by one? Now, you have to understand that if that was to be the case, nearly all of our people would be coming into Orthodoxy to worship in a language they did not understand. We maintained that it was unreasonable to expect that. I am telling the truth as God is my judge. Metropolitan Callistos and Bishop Basil, representing the Greek and Russian diocese, say we'd love to help you, but this we cannot give you.
Wow.
Now, I tell the truth. Sometimes some people later on said, well, why didn't you come to us? And we said, well, we did come to you, and this is the answer that you gave us.
Oh. For this reason, can we consider the Antiochian are very receptive to other cultures?
Because when we approached the Antiochians in America first, because we didn't know anything about the cathedral, and the cathedral very much kept itself to itself at that time. So we went to, as you might expect, English speakers. We went to America, and we went to Metropolitan Philip. And because of his experience of the Protestants coming on and became the Evangelical Orthodox Church, and then later included in the Archdiocese, we knew about their history. And so Father Michael Kaiser of blessed memory, Father Peter Gilchrist of blessed memory, and Father Basil Oldenhausen, who is still alive, I believe, who is retired in Minnesota, they all came over. By the blessing of Metropolitan Philip, we had mission conferences. They gave talks. Father Michael Harper, my predecessor as dean, was there. We had a large number of people present. Antioch shared its vision. By that time, the Patriarchate had been alerted by Metropolitan Philip to what was going on. The Patriarch then, presumably, we don't really know, had conversations with Metropolitan Philip that it was time for this project to be handed over to the local patriarchal vicar, who was Bishop Gabriel in Paris. So we were handed over from America to Paris.
But at that time, was his thrice-blessed memory Ignatius IV, the patriarch?
Indeed, amen. Yes, he was the patriarch. And it's a fascinating story, this. It really is, because for the time when we were with the Americans, I did a postgraduate study in Orthodoxy. Those things that Metropolitan Philip and his team considered that Anglicans will probably be weak on. Patristics, for example. Yes, absolutely. Because classical Anglicanism before the 1960s majored on patristics big time. I'm not saying every seminary did or didn't, but mine didn't major on patristics. So I really welcome that. And so we'd done our study. We had American priests coming over, catechizing our people, putting to rest the misinformation that we were not catechizing people. I mean, even at one point, there was an attempt by the Church of England, as it was then, to try and have what is called an inter-Orthodox Anglican committee to manage us. They didn't invite us to join that committee, by the way. That just fell through. Anyway, Antioch was receptive. I shouldn't say much about that. Antioch was receptive. We had a meeting with Thrice Blessed Memory Patriarch Ignatius, so absolutely wonderful man who I got to know personally in Paris with Bishop Gabriel. Got the photograph. I must put it back on our website, actually.
I remember, I have it. I have the photograph.
You got that photograph, and I'm at the back with a bit.
I will publish it. I will publish it in the group.
And my arms in a sling, because we'd left the Church of England, right? Okay, so we were worshipping in an independent congregation in Stockport, where I live, and I was just messing around with some lads after the service, and I tripped over my cassock. And I broke my shoulder, and I had my arm in a sling. So I went to Paris with my arm in a sling. If you look carefully at the photograph, you'll see that. Anyway, point is, we were worshipping as independents at this point when we came under the omophorion of the Patriarch and Bishop Gabriel, right? We were worshipping as independents. Somebody, again, no names, in a jurisdiction of influence in the UK said, they may have left the Church of England, but they're using the liturgy of John Chrysostom. They shouldn't be doing that.
Oh,
and a complaint was made to the Patriarch himself, Ignatius, that this was happening. Now, you have to understand, as independents, we didn't want to use Anglican services anymore.
Yeah.
We had been trained in how to serve the liturgy by American priests and the other services. We weren't doing it, but we were sitting in on them doing it, and it was being explained to us in detail, right? In regional conferences that went all around the country. Also, Nicholas Chapman did the music as well. This was a comprehensive induction into Orthodox Christianity at every level. St. Stephen's course in America, yeah? And all the other aspects were being put in place. And now we had fellow Orthodox saying, you shouldn't be using Orthodox services because you're not yet Orthodox.
Wow. It is interesting.
And the Patriarch, through the Bishop Gabriel, said to us, look, this is a bit of a delicate issue here. This was in October 1994.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a delicate issue here, because it's upsetting other Orthodox and other Orthodox hierarchs, by the way. So would you please consider, this is how it was said to us by the Patriarch and Bishop Gabriel himself, would you please consider not serving the liturgy until you're received, for the sake of the peace of the church? Right? Now, you've got to understand that since I became a Christian in 1975, and I was confirmed in 1976 in the spring, there had been not 1 month, or even week really, but month certainly, in my whole experience of being a Christian when I had not received Holy Communion. So now here was the Orthodox Church of Antioch asking me and my congregation, of which there are about 20-25, to go on a Eucharistic fast for an indefinite period until we were just ready to be received. I took this back to my people. I said, I know this is a disappointment. I know this is a great disruption. I know we're not Orthodox, we're independents. But in order for the peace of the church, shall we do this? And all the community said yes. And Father Samir Golam, parish priest at the cathedral, who's will relate and confirm this. He was so happy. I had a personal conversation with him when we said, yes, we will do this. And so for the first time in our Christian lives, we did not receive communion. From October 1994 till March 1995, when we started to be received.
But what now if, for example, the Anglican Church decide to go to Saint John the Chrysostom liturgy? It is unpermitted?
That would be as insignificant as, for us, Rome simply using Chrysostom for Eastern Rite Catholics.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have no more significance than that, because you're not Orthodox by using a service. You use a service because you're Orthodox. It doesn't make you Orthodox. And moreover, the liturgy of John Chrysostom is not the personal, private possession of any Orthodox.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. This is my question. You know what I mean? As you said,
exactly, ignorance.
Like
really was.
Like Eastern Catholic in Syria, they are using Chrysostom.
So what?
Yeah,
who cares?
Yeah, it is not a private property to any Christian.
No, it's not private property of any, this is Chrysostom, the Roman Rite as well. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble here. The Roman Rite, at least the ancient Roman Rite, is perfectly Orthodox. Right? You don't have to say, oh, it belongs to Rome. Rome doesn't say it belongs to Rome. Why do we say that ours belongs to us?
Yeah.
And we know why, actually. Actually, it's political, because with the Uniates, the growth of the Uniates in Eastern Europe and into Ukraine, and of course, it's behind a lot of what we're witnessing right now. Rome was allowing Orthodox communities to come into full union, in case people don't know what Uniates are, allowing people to come into full union with Rome, but to keep their services, initially at least, the married clergy, although not later, in some places at least, and have all the unity economia of the ancient Christian tradition of the East incorporated into churches that were then in communion with the West. And whether you're Melkite or whether you're Maronite or whether you're Eastern Rite Catholic, Greek Catholics, no matter what you are, Ukrainian Catholics, this is what's happening. So of course, what does Orthodoxy do? Says they've stolen our service. Now, actually, the sensitivity about this in Orthodoxy is ecclesiastically political, because if Orthodoxy starts using a Western rite, will not Rome say, you've stolen that from us? But actually, no, Rome won't say you've stolen that from us. They'll say to us, that's fine. We're rediscovering the unity of the church and her liturgical rites.
Like before, in fact, the Great Division, there was different rites.
Well, there were different, yes. So you see, there was a Roman rite, there was a Celtic rite, there was a Mozarabic rite, there was a Gallican rite, there was an Ambrosian rite, there was a rite in Rome, there was Mark in Egypt, there was James in Jerusalem. Chrysostom took that from West Syria to Constantinople, became universal, went into Russia. We've had a plurality of rites. Nobody said this is our possession.
Yeah, exactly.
Astounding,
this is an important point.
Astounding ignorance to think otherwise.
Yeah, this is an important point.
And it's why Antioch, as well as Rocourt, have been hospitable towards the Western Rite. I'm not against the Western Rite, let the reader understand, but I think there is a problem in, I might get into trouble again, but I think there is an issue for me, at least, in the rites that are being used, because I think that they could be improved. Because I think they're taking, a pre-Trent Roman rite, and they're taking a 19th century Scottish Episcopalian rite that was taken to America. It was, so Tikhon did a lot of this, why it's called after him, But speaking as an Anglican that knows what the Book of Common Prayer is like and what it's about, it's insufficiently suffused with the fullness of a Eucharistic anaphora. I think Orthodoxy, if it wanted a better rite for the West, would either do Trent, or they would do something more modern that was recognizably patristic. I don't accept the argument, though, Hallam, that we've got to have the Western Rite or else Westerners will not become Orthodox. Because the Western Rite appeals to a certain constituency which is familiar with these old Western rites, the old Western rites. But actually, the bulk of Anglicans and others, and Romans for that matter now, worship in modern liturgical forms. Okay. They're not familiar with these older forms. So I don't think I'm being too unkind to say that the older forms appeal to an older generation, not to the young.
I understand that. Now, just could you please tell me about the transition between deanery and archdiocese?
Right, yeah. Now then, here is encapsulated in a little story the problems that are encountered right across the Orthodox Church when there is not a proper appreciation, at least initially, of the authenticity, shall we say, of I'm not talking now about the deanery, I'm going back to 1995. The basic problem is, can these people really be Orthodox? I mean, really Orthodox, rather than just pretend Anglicans wearing Orthodox vestments, because that was some of the calumnies that were heaped upon us in the beginning. You know, you just pretend Orthodox, you're really still Anglican. Now, there may be some, I mean, quite frankly, quite honestly, there may be some who were fitting that description, but for whatever reason, the Patriarch Ignatius was persuaded back in 1995 that rather than have just a simple one vicariate for everyone here, that a deanery should be created. This happened in 1995, Bishop Gabriel. He was the vicar bishop to the Patriarch. We were not yet a diocese. And so this is what happened. A deanery was created. We were under Bishop Gabriel. It was a bit like the Evangelical Orthodox Church in America, you know, Father Peter Gilchrist and all the rest, and Father Michael Kaiser, catechized us, all their communities, particularly Father Peter Gilchrist communities, because they were Eastern Rite. We decided to go Eastern Rite. Okay. And so the deanery existed then quite happily as a vicariate, and then as a diocese in Europe quite happily. And then in 2013, by the decision of the Holy Synod, the Archdiocese of Europe was carved up into 3 dioceses, and we were one, Archdiocese of British Isles and Ireland. And so we waited 3 years, we're about two and a bit years, for our resident bishop, who was consecrated in 2015 and who arrived here in 2016, and whose enthronement we've just celebrated, the anniversary of, that is, 7th year. And it was deemed by our bishop, and I understand this, and I supported this when he shared this with me, that at the beginning we should continue the deanery. Because as yet the archdiocesan structures were not in place. And there was basically, the archdiocese basically consisted of a bank account, a constitution, and a membership, ecclesiastically at least, of all the communities. But apart from me being the dean, the successor to Michael Harper, as being the coordinator for the bishop of the time for the deanery parishes, and so I tended to be the chief cook and bottle washer. You know, I did mostly everything in terms of administration, legality, and finance. And so that situation continued, because that's my background, by the way, in finance. I used to work in a bank. That continued through the early years of Sayed Silouan's episcopate. But the growth in the archdiocese, the leadership of our bishop, the strengthening of our mission, meant that for myself and for my wife, because we're both archdiocesan safeguarding officers, a lot of other hats that we used to wear, it was just becoming too much. And I was realizing that it was becoming toxic, Now, a lot of people will not agree with me here, including the patriarch himself, I think, but we speak plainly, don't we, in the Orthodox Church?
Yeah. Please.
I think it was becoming, I think it was becoming toxic because it was becoming a hindrance to mission. It was becoming such that it was breaking Helen and I. We were just working after work all the time, a number of hours that she and I were spending on archdiocesan matters, because her job as archdiocesan safeguarding lead is particularly intensive. The training, the police checks, and everything else that we have to do for church workers, that we need to do for church workers. Okay, so I began to say that, look, Sayed, we need to do this. But the problem is, and I really feel for him, and I really feel for all the actors involved. I'm not being critical here of anyone, but we encounter now the problem that is so often encountered by people who continue to do jobs because they do them reasonably well, not blowing my own trumpet, but they do them reasonably well. And people are content to let you keep on doing the job until your funeral. And because people thought, how are we going to do this without the dean? I mean, the number of times people have implored me not to resign from being the dean. I mean, I nearly resigned twice in this period because I thought that I was becoming a hindrance. Me personally, hopefully not because of my personality, but because of the sheer existence of the office of a dean. Because what we had as the years passed by were parallel systems. We had an archdiocesan charity, we had a deanery charity. We had archdiocesan finance, we had deanery finance. You know, the pastoring of the bishop, but for the English language usage, I don't mean English people, because we're a multicultural, all our communities are multicultural. Romanians, Bulgarians, Russians, Greeks, whatever, where they don't have their own, don't want to, or don't have their own local church nearby. So, and of course, people becoming Orthodox Christian with no background, you know. So we have this complex array of multicultural communities, and it was still thought in the diocese and by the bishop that it was still better to have the deanery. I thought, right, it's breaking. I was quite honest with Sayedna, and he was very sympathetic. And I promised him that I would not resign until 2 years had elapsed, and 2 years is up. And so I thought, right, on grounds of my health, the amount of time I'm spending in the parish, in the diocese rather than the parish, I will train people. So I basically said, I'm going to resign. I really need to. Then the bishop blessed it, because I wouldn't do anything without the blessing of the bishop. Okay. Because I could just have down tools. No, I'm not like that. I'm not irresponsible. He said, right, okay, you resign. So I resigned. And as soon as I resigned, all these jobs, because there's a time scale, you know, I do archdiocesan safeguarding and my wife do till the end of April. I do the finance till the end of May. It's not an indefinite, there is a cutoff point, right? And it's wonderful how a cutoff point concentrates minds, because now everything starts to slot into place. Now we have a vicar general. Now we have a protosingulos. Now we have an archbishop's council. Now we have all the things that I'd longed for from before. Because the bishop felt, I think, I'm sorry, Sayed, I'm not taking your words out of your mouth or your thoughts out of your mind. I think the bishop then felt confident that there were people coming forward who would do these things, that would take over my jobs. When he had that confidence, bless you, Sayed, if you permit me to bless the bishop, when you had that confidence, everything started to slot into place. Sometimes the best thing you can do in life, and this is any job, not the job that I do, sometimes the best thing you can do in life, particularly in a community or an organization that's growing, is to resign. So I'm very pleased. I wouldn't say I gave myself the sack, because, you know, I'm just joking, but I'm very pleased that I'm now able to train, and so is Helen, hand over these jobs to other very capable persons who will take the archdiocese forward, and creating a conciliar framework and a united framework, including the cathedral, including all the parishes. The deanery is dead. Long live the archdiocese.
Wonderful. That is excellent. That is excellent. I would like...
And just quickly, that's what happened to Metropolitan Philip, isn't it? In your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
after the Evangelical Orthodox Church, who are equivalent to the deanery, had been going for a bit, Metropolitan Philip, in conversation with them, folded it down into the diocese, and now the parishes are not distinguishable.
Yeah, yes. The parishes are not distinguishable now, and we should do that because this is the way Orthodox Church functions.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Now, I would like you to tell us about how many parishes do you have, and what is their geographical distribution?
Okay, so this is on Haytham. This is on our Archdiocesan website, which is www.antiochian-orthodox.com.
Yeah.
And on there, if you go to parishes, parish directory,
Okay.
in the horizontal menu, you'll find a map. So
Okay,
that's the
sure.
distribution. So just very briefly, we've got parishes on the south coast of England. We've got parishes, 2 parishes in London. We're very small. I mean, we're 16 parishes and 5 missions. We're babies in this.
Yes.
We're a baby diocese, right?
But it is good.
but
5
we've-
missions. 5 missions.
Well, yes, 5 missions. So 21 communities, 5 not big enough yet to be a parish. We've got 26 priests. We've got 5 deacons. We've got 2 retired priests serving those communities. Now, I mean, just going round, we've got Dublin, we've got Belfast in Ireland, we've got Poole on the south coast, we've got Athelhampton on the south coast, we've got London, 2 parishes, St Botolph's and the Cathedral. Going around the country, around the east coast upwards, we've got Colchester, St Helen and St Martin, which is on the east coast of England. Going further up, we've got Sutton and Stalham. Their church has just been consecrated by our bishop the last weekend. Going further north, we've got St Ethelhard's in Louth in Lincolnshire, on the east coast of England, adjacent to the North Sea. We've got All Saints of Lincolnshire in Lincoln. We've got St Maria and it's just gone out of my head. Maria and Aidan, another Aidan, in Grimsby. We've got a mission in Scunthorpe, St Highbold. Going then across, we've got St Constantine the Great in York. We've got St Columbrus and Kentigern in Doncaster. Moving across, we've got Holy Cross in Lancaster with Morecambe. Coming down then further south, we've got Manchester, St Aidan, which is my parish. We've got St Michael Audley and Holy Resurrection Dresden. And then moving back down south, we've got into the West Country and the not quite into the West Country, but into Worcestershire. We've got All Saints of Lincoln, All Saints of Worcestershire. And I think I've listed them all. I hope I have, else I'm going to get in trouble. Yeah. So if you look at the map of England and you go to that map, the demographics basically are mixed. Mine is an inner city, working class, poor parish. Other places are a little bit more leafy green and suburban. All the diocesan communities outside of London, at least, are one of them in London is multicultural, but the rest are all multicultural, multi-language. And we're in good heart. We're small. We're a baby diocese. We're now Metropolitan Silwan, from his wisdom, has divided the country up into 3 regional mission areas. With 3 regional mission coordinators. I'm the mission coordinator for the West, Father Michael Alexander from York Parish for the East, and Father Philip Lamette for the Southern regional mission area. And we're working together to develop mission strategies to evangelize and to seed new Orthodox congregations in each of those 3 areas. So from humble beginnings at the deanery, although we're still a baby diocese, we've got big ideas and big vision.
Wonderful.
Remember, in Proverbs, where the vision fails, the people perish.
This is great and wonderful, and we hope a collaboration between the British Island Archdiocese and our Archdiocese.
Yeah, because we have our roots in yours.
Yes, this is great.
But we also want to work with other Orthodox, and I know from my description, everyone listening here will understand we had a difficult beginning with the other Orthodox Christians. But it must be said that within a few years, once they realized that we were really Orthodox and not pretend Anglican, and that once we started meeting with each other on pilgrimages, going to conferences and so on and so forth, and with the intervention also of Bishop Callistos, who knew us quite well by then, all those early problems went away. So we want to work with all Orthodox, but by all Orthodox, we mean all Orthodox.
Yeah,
and
yeah, exactly.
we don't get involved in other people's fights.
Yeah, but in France there is like a commission of inter-Orthodox commission between,
Yeah.
and we have the same here in the United States too. Maybe this is a model that can be developed in England.
Well, we had it with an assembly of bishops,
Yeah.
and then essentially it all collapsed.
Oh, I understand.
So it should and could be put back together again.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is a Humpty Dumpty that needs to be put back together again.
Exactly, because that in fact referred to my next question about the future of Orthodoxy in Great Britain. How
Yeah.
do you see the perspective of future of Orthodoxy in Great Britain?
Beset by problems, but wonderful and glorious.
Wonderful. That is great. That is great. That is very reassuring. Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, that is very reassuring.
We've got to be clear-minded, clear-headed about seeing what is there and not doing political spin over it or pretending that it's better than it is. We have to say, when Father Peter Gilchrist and Father Michael Kaiser and Father Basil Aldhausen came to those mission conferences back in 1993, they said to us, become Orthodox because of the faith and life of the Church. But don't be over concerned by the scandals that beset us, because we're human beings, we're a family, and sometimes families fight. We don't have to all march in step, but we do have to be in love and charity with each other.
Yes, that is correct. Now, just my last question, the very last question. I believe you heard about our sister diocese program that was between the Diocese of Wichita and the Diocese of Hauran in Syria.
Yeah.
Are you interested in that?
Which I've been to. I've stayed one weekend with your new Archbishop Metropolitan Saba when I visited Lebanon and Syria in happier times. So I've been with him. Yeah.
How is your impression about him?
Always wonderful. He really is. I mean, he really is. There are certain bishops, including our own, that have wonderful gifts, and he is, knowing the man, albeit briefly, and being there with him at the Antiochian First International Antiochian Conference in 2014 in Ballamand. I've seen him at close quarters, and he will be a great, great blessing for your church.
Do you know that he has a very good relation with
I know, and I know why that is as well.
Yeah, and
I don't know whether it would be fitting and proper for us to declare that in public here, but I know very well how close they are.
Yeah. For this reason, I finished my questions. If you have anything to say, please say it.
No, I think that if you were hinting at the possibility of a sisterhood, bearing in mind our common history in the beginning and also our continuing involvement with each other over the years, we bought quite a few books as well from Antiochian Village over there.
Yeah, wonderful.
Over time, and we've had people come here, we have people us go there, and so on and so forth. So it seems to me, look, I'm not a bishop. It's something that Metropolitan Silouan and Metropolitan Saba might want to talk about, but I'm not a bishop. It's up to them. Would I like to see it? You bet I would.
Okay. Sorry, what is?
I said, would you? I said, I'm speaking for myself. Yeah. Would I like to see that sisterhood thing? Yeah. You bet I would. Yes.
Yes. Anyway, I will transmit that message to both Metropolitan Silouan and Metropolitan Saba.
Good.
And
excellent.
We will see where we can go from there. I would like to thank you very much. My personal affection toward you, because I know you since long time, even before starting the group of Antiochian Orthodoxy in North America. I know you even before that. And I have a great respect for you. And really, I feel happy and joy every time I see your posts on Facebook.
Now I can see you face to face. My joy itself is tripled. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okie dokie.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who's put up with me witter on for hours and hours, as my parish sadly has to deal with, you know, but thank you for being attentive, and thank you, Hallam, for your questions and your wisdom.
Yeah, hopefully we can meet in the future too. We discuss other things.
I hope so. I hope so. God willing.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye for now.